Hi, Linda or Sheila. Could you kindly confirm that you can hear me okay?
Can hear you fine, Bruce.
That's great. Welcome. We'll get underway in a couple of minutes. So it's 1 o'clock. We'll get underway in less than a minute. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for joining. My name is Bruce Miller, and I'm with RimTech Consulting. So today's topic is about artificial intelligence. I do not believe you need it to properly manage records in Microsoft Purview. So let's get underway here. So I have three reasons why I don't believe it's necessary to use it in Purview to get the job done. Number one is it won't deliver the needed classification accuracy rate. Now, when I say classification, I don't mean what Microsoft normally means. I mean classification against the retention schedule. So that's what I mean by classification. And I'll tell you about the last mile of classification, which is where AI tends to be weak. The second reason I think it's not necessary is because statistically, 4/5 of all modern electronic records are emails, and AI needs to be able to read the content and understand what the document is about, and look at how little content is inside email. And thirdly is why would we need it if we can get the job done otherwise without it? And that's the reality, and that's what I'll introduce you to. Okay. So in order to get into these topics, we've had to look at a couple things first. Number one is we have to look at the numbers behind a typical modern EDRMS. And secondly, you have to understand what case records are. And thirdly, we'll need to look at exactly what AI is in Purview. Only then can we look at the actual reasons why you don't need it, okay? So a little bit of education up front here. So the first thing is, what do I mean by compliance? Well, think of it this way. Microsoft Purview is a big, round, shiny, hollow, heavy bowling ball, and inside it is a little golf ball called Purview Records Management. So records management is only a part of the greater Purview, and compliance means a lot more than just records compliance. But everything I'm talking about today is strictly related to record keeping compliance, not data loss prevention, not security, nothing like that, okay? So to me, compliance means that every document in SharePoint complies with an appropriate retention rule out of the retention schedule. Number two, it means that all the documents are being managed as a record. And that means, in turn, three things. Number one, it's immutable, cannot be modified. Number two, it's assigned a proper, appropriate retention rule. That's what I mean when I say a document is classified. And third is 60% of all modern digital records are what I call case records. You might know it as event-based trigger dates. Same difference. 60% or more are event-based. And that will have a huge impact on the AI usage. And number three, compliance means that we can do a disposition. Disposition means you're going to press one button and you will destroy millions of digital records in a heartbeat. That's a huge responsibility, and no records professional in their right mind would ever do it unless and until they had sufficient confidence to do it. So what does the confidence require? 85% or more, I believe closer to 95% of all your records must be classified accurately, which means correctly, which means you have to prove it, not only to yourself, but to the outside world. Do not pull that switch unless you can guarantee yourself and the outside world that you're around 90% classification accuracy. That's a non-negotiable premise of any EDRMS project. And that's why I believe that over 95% of all EDRMS projects on the planet are not compliant because they cannot do a disposition. So first of all, let's take a look at EDRMS by the numbers. Let's pretend that we have 10 users, and I'm going to give one document to each of the 10, and I'll ask them two questions. Question one, is this a record? Question two, where does this go in the retention schedule? You know what? I'm likely to get up to 10 different answers. Worse is that if I do exactly the same thing with the same people in the same document a month later, I'll get a different set of answers. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that we shouldn't try to make users do something they don't want to do and they're no good at. They have no consequences. No one's ever been fired for not complying with records, right? And most users say, look, I already feel, undercompensated and overworked. Give me a break. This is just too much to do. Even if we were to force them to do it, it still wouldn't work, okay? So the conclusion there is we need to automate. We're going to have to automate, okay? Now, does that mean AI? No, it means we're going to use the machine to automate the process. So where does that leave the users? Well, if the users aren't going to declare or classify, that means we need them to do just three things. Number one, put documents into the right places. If this document is about an expense claim reimbursement, put it in the library called expense reimbursement. If it's about fleet vehicle maintenance, put it in the library called fleet vehicle maintenance. Not hard to do. Almost impossible to do wrong if you have meaningful metadata in each library. This is the killer right here. They have to put the documents into the right cases. What is a case? A case is a set of related records, which we'll get to in a few minutes, but over 60% of all your records are going to have to go in these special places. And the third thing we need users to do is simply fill in metadata, okay? What would the metadata look like for expense claim reimbursements? Well, it might be purpose, dollar amount, date submitted, approved by, and date reimbursed. versus fleet vehicle maintenance, where the metadata might look like work order number, vehicle number, make and model, date in, date out, technician name, etc. Okay, so some of that metadata will be used to classify the documents accurately. So we got to be careful that the users actually fill in metadata. And there's a huge hole on the side of SharePoint, which is people can put documents in without any metadata, even if it's mandatory. That's a real problem in SharePoint. If you want to know more about any of this stuff, check my YouTube channel out. I've got lots of YouTube videos about this. So now let's put some numbers to this. Let's say we have 1,000 users, and turns out that typically and statistically, you bring me 1,000 North American users, and you know what I'll find out? I'll find out that each of them receives on average 50 inbound emails, 20% of which would qualify as records. That means 10 of those 50 emails should/must be managed as records. How many non-emails do they produce? Well, that's what I call documents that exist today but did not exist yesterday. Where do they come from? People created them or downloaded them from websites or received them from someone else or were generated by some software. Doesn't matter. But statistically, on average, 10 emails, 2 non-emails equals 12 records per person per day. So that's a flow rate of 12,000 records per day. Every working day, 220 working days a year, you end up with almost 3 million records per year. So if any records professional thinks that you're going to look at these, check these, inspect these, correct these, you're dreaming in Technicolor. It's just not going to happen. And here's the math behind that. If I give you 1 minute per document to check it, examine it, correct it, do anything with any of those 12,000 records, you would need 25 person days of work to process one single day of that records flow of 12,000. One single day. Let that go on for a year. Now you've got 6 million documents, and you've got 25 days of work times 220. I've not done the math, but I do know that you're not going to get this done. It's just not going to happen. So that means that we have an absolute, utter dependency on the users and the system to get this done without any records management intervention. Okay? So let's talk Purview for a minute. There are 2 schools of thought. One school of thought says users are responsible for record keeping. They have a duty to do so, and they're responsible. So we will count on to do that. Fair enough. The second school of thought says, are you out of your mind? That's not going to happen successfully. They don't want to do it. They're not motivated. Most of our users haven't seen a retention schedule since they started work here. The retention schedule is at a date. And even if we had it, to expect people to do this 12 times a day and get it right, you're out of your mind. Not going to happen. Therefore, compliance doesn't come from users. It comes from the organization, and we impose it on users. 2 totally opposite schools of thought. Which one is right? The one that says we have to impose it on the users, not the other way around. Purview, out of the box, is on the right-hand side of this diagram. Purview says compliance comes from users, not from the organization. That's upside down. It's backwards. To properly configure Purview, you're going to have to turn that right side up, okay? And that's doable. Again, I have more YouTube videos on that and training courses. But at the end of the day, no matter which software you buy, including Microsoft Purview, you're going to have to automate this, okay? This is why. At 12,000 records a day, there can be no records intervention. Nothing, 0. We can't rely on the users. Therefore, we have to automate. That's the logic chain. We have to automate. The only question is, how do we automate? Can we just throw this all to an artificial intelligence engine and walk away? No. So let's take a look at that. Now, this is the most important part of this session today, which is the classification accuracy rate. If it were, let's say, 50%, would you do a disposition? Well, of course not. Can you fix that? If I have 3 million records, can I fix those if I find out that half of them are right and half of them are wrong? Absolutely not. The math doesn't support it. You would need far too much time to fix them. So it's not fixable. My conclusion is you have to set an acceptable threshold, which I believe to be 85% or higher. You have to measure it every day, and you have to prove that you've met that number. Without that number, you will never proceed with a disposition. Unless you are over 85%, how are you going to know if you don't measure it? You see the paradox? You're trapped, right? You have to measure, you have to prove it. Only then can you proceed with the disposition with confidence, okay? Now, I've got a YouTube videos on how to do all this. So here's an examination of a very bad week in a records manager's life. 6,000 records a day came in. Beautiful. But 50% of them were incorrectly classified. Well, I have a special technique to measure that, even though it sounds impossible to measure, because just measuring it would take way too long. But there is a way to do it. If you prove that it's 50% accurate, you have 15,000 mistakes by the end of the week. But the tool doesn't tell you which of the records are the right ones and which ones are the wrong ones. So you've got to go back through all of them. Once again, you'd need 13 full-time employees in one single week just to fix the mistakes of one week. This is just not going to happen, okay? So in a typical modern compliant SharePoint, you might have, let's say, 800, for 1,000 users, you'd have roughly 800 categories in your retention schedule, 60% of which will be case categories or event driven. That means that you would have 480 case categories and 320 administrative categories. And that's going to become important in a moment, okay? In fact, the moment has arrived, which is case records. You have to understand what case records are. So bear with me, please, for 5 or 6 minutes here, okay? Case records, to me, is the biggest weakness of, it used to be the biggest weakness of the technology, and it still is for Purview. But for us practitioners in the business, it's a major, major problem, okay? This is a weakness. If I look at EDRMS projects around the world, and I can point to some by name, they're not successful. Why not? Because of this. So it's the single biggest mistake of modern EDRMS projects to get this wrong, okay? And this has a profound effect on how SharePoint is structured and subsequently governed. Now here's an examination, a small portion, a fragment of a modern software-ready retention schedule. Each row is a category or a record series or activity, whatever you want to call it, in the retention schedule. And you'll notice that each activity has a yes or a no for case records. Why? Because Purview must be told for every single record, am I a case or am I a non-case? Case means the retention rule that it'll use is event date plus X years, then delete, transfer, or permanent. If it's not a case category, then it'll calculate this. It'll say, how old is this document? It'll take today minus the document's date, which will yield the age, and it compares the age to the retention rule. If it's younger, it's kept. If it's older, it's marked for deletion or transfer or permanent, whatever, okay? So every one of those categories in your retention schedule must specify case or non-case. So what are case records exactly? Well, they're records belonging to a case activity. And the activity is about a person, place, event, or thing, which means they all kind of die or end at least, okay? 3 good examples. Contracts, they start, they end. Employment starts and terminates. Projects, they start and they end. So imagine you had 1,000 contracts, 1,000 employees, which we do, and 1,000 projects. Well, that means we have 3,000 cases. What is a case? A case is an adventure. It's a repeated adventure. Take audits, for example. You do a health and safety audit in February, and that generates a set of records related to that February health and safety audit. You then do an audit in November for financial statements. Totally different adventure, different end date, different set of records. But here's the trick. Their records have to be kept apart from each other. So if we have 1,000 contracts, we need 1,000 different batches of records, and we need 1,000 uniquely different end dates. If we have 1,000 employees, we can't mix the records up. We need to keep them separated. We need 1,000 places to store those records, and we need to keep on hand 1,000 termination dates, and so on. So the idea of Purview is that it will destroy the records based on the end of the adventure or case, not the age of individual documents within the case. That's the reverse with non-case records of 40%. The retention is applied to each individual document, and the documents kind of fall off a moving conveyor belt at the end of their life cycle by their age, document by document. Okay? Totally different treatments. So, like it or not, you've got to deal with this in Purview or any other record software. Now, I'll wrap up your case training with this, which is we do have 1,000 contracts. What does that mean? That means that every time a user puts a document into SharePoint, we have no choice but to force the user to choose which contract this document is about. How do we force the user to choose it? Doesn't matter how. It can be a drop down, a pop up, a fly out, whatever the mechanism is. But they have to tell us which contract this document is related to. Why? Well, it's mathematical. Think about it. The user can't just come up and say, here's a document about a contract, but it's a big secret. I'm not going to tell you which contract it's about. That just makes no sense. Now, that will have a direct impact on artificial intelligence in a moment. So keep this in the back of your mind, please. Okay? So here's a little bit of a working example. We have a retention schedule with 253 categories or activities or record series. 253. 250 of them are admin categories, no cases involved. 3 of them, contracts, employees, and projects, are case categories, and they're broken into 1,000 individual cases. So that means that if I have 12,000 records per day flowing towards SharePoint, where are they going to go? That's your job. You have to say, this is where they're going to go, right? So we have to have destinations in SharePoint for these to go. 60% or 7,200 of those 12,000 are going to be flying down the pipe at SharePoint into either contracts, employees, or projects. But they don't stop there. Which contract, which employee, and which project? So that means that if we have a container for every case, which we'll need in order to keep them separate from each other, that means there are 3,000 different places for those 7,200 records to go in SharePoint. And yeah, there's nothing unusual about these numbers. What about the other 4,800 records out of those 12,000 that are not case records? Well, they're headed towards the other 250 destinations in SharePoint. 250 places for them to go, but they don't get broken into cases. So in this slide alone, we have 3,250 possible places for those 12,000 records per day to go. Got it? Now, in a really good, properly deployed EDRMS, how does the user choose which of the 1,000 employees that this record is related to? Here's how. It is a mechanism called a document set. So if you look at this diagram here, the library in SharePoint is called competitive procurement. And these things here are are document sets. A document set is a container with magical properties that make it ideally suited for cases. We won't be getting into that today, but there is a YouTube video on our YouTube channel all about cases and how to handle them. That detail is for another day. But you can see here, if I had, this is for procurement, and depending on which procurement I'm involved in, that's where I put the record, okay? Hugely important. Why? Because each of these cases has a different disposition date, a different end date. Therefore, if I put it in the wrong case, I have misclassified it, okay? If I have a document about a laptop refresh program and I accidentally put it into landscaping services, then it won't get the right date applied. So again, and this is a really important point, if I put a document in the wrong case, it's misclassified, even if it's in the right library, okay? So the library is, let's say, employee records, but there are 1,000 employee document sets in there. I had to pick one of the 1,000, right? So now you've got the basic knowledge you need to figure out how to how how to get this done. You will in a moment. So let's take a look at what the AI actually is in Purview. There are two levels of AI in Purview. One's called trainable classifiers and one is called document understanding models. The trainable classifiers are included in your E5 license. There's no extra cost for it. They're older technology and they're low accuracy. So at the risk of insulting the trainable classifiers, what they are is they give you pattern matching. Pretty much. A little more to it than that, but not a lot. Number two is document understanding models. That's much, much, much more sophisticated. You also have to pay extra money for it. It's more accurate, and it's at least a decade or two newer than the original trainable classifiers. And this number two technology was acquired by Microsoft from a company called Syntax a few years back. I don't know how much they paid for it, but it was enormous. This was when AI was still pretty new. Okay, so trainable classifiers. Here's what they are. What you do, the intent of them is to train them so that they can recognize what a document is about. Once it knows what a document is about, it can put it in the right place in SharePoint. That's basically it. Not very complicated. So here we have some contract documents, some investigation documents, and some expense reimbursement documents. So the idea is to use machine learning so they understand which of these documents on the left are falling into one of these three categories. Now this diagram here is the official Microsoft diagram to show the process of how to create a classifier. You create one classifier, i.e. trainable classifier, for each of the target subjects, such as investigations, contracts, or expenses, okay? Now, you have to train these things. How? Well, you select a number of documents that match the target activity, called positives, and you take a bunch that do not match it, called negatives, and you throw them both at the classification engine, and it will digest them and identify which ones are matching and which ones are not. It won't get it right. It won't get it right because it's not perfect. But but the more times you train it and the more frequently you train it and the more documents you throw at it, it'll get better and better and better. It won't even take a score of its accuracy until it reaches 70%. That's the minimum, okay? So how many documents do you need to train it? There are two answers. Here's the first answer. Minimum of 50 positive and 150 negative samples. So that's 200 documents. Please don't do that. You're not even going to get close, okay? What's the recommended best practice in the industry for this, 200 positive and 500 negative. The more you train it with, the higher the accuracy. 700 documents. How long will it take you to collect them, train it, and perfect this? Just think about that for a minute. It's a lot of overhead. Now, here is the problem with this whole thing. I call it the last mile of classification. Let's take a look. We have 3 target categories: contracts, investigations, and expenses. We have a trainable classifier. So we're going to train each of these 3 topics. Contracts, there's 700 documents. Investigations, 700 more. Contracts. Now I've trained these 3 with 2,100 documents. What is my accuracy level? Who knows? Hopefully 70%. Okay. Can it be better? Maybe. But the closer you get to perfection, the more and more effort you put into it. There has to be a cutoff point at some point, right? So far, so good. We've now got 3 trainable classifiers up and running. So let's throw some documents at each, shall we? So we're going to throw a bunch of documents we suspect are expenses. So the expense ones go there, the investigations documents go there, and the contracts go there. All good. What is our accuracy rate? Well, our target is 85%. What did we achieve? Well, maybe 70%, but that's not the bigger problem. You know what the bigger problem is? The last mile. Because if you understood the previous piece, you'll know that this isn't good enough. It's easy for a software engine to say, oh, this document is about a contract. Why? Well, because the word contract occurred into it. Wow, I'm smart. But the fact is that's not the last mile. The last mile is which contract, which investigation. There are 1,000 contracts. Which one is this document about? That's where AI falls flat on its face. I have tested it myself. I have also interviewed 2 vendors, and after a while, they were forced to admit, yeah, that's an issue. That is not something we can really do. You would have to have something reliable in every single document that told you which contract it was about. It's just not safe to do it. So that's what I call the last mile of classification, which is which case is it a member of? So it takes about a week to build and test these things. And depending on who you talk to, you get different opinions as to how many minimums, how many maximum positive and negative samples. Every time I do a query, I get a different answer, but at least you need at least 500. That would be my absolute minimum. Okay, that's a lot of work. Now, what about the second level, which is document understanding models? This is much more sophisticated technology. I actually like this one. Uh, but again, it's no different than the previous one. It cannot do that last mile. Is it smarter? Yes. But that's not really its purpose, okay? It has much better purposes than this. So, you can use it for more things. And I'm told that the training level is much less. You can probably train it with under 100 documents. I've been told that you can train it with as little as 10. I'm super skeptical about that. But you never know. You never know. So how do you get that second level? Well, it's called Microsoft Premium. It is not built into an E5 license. It is a pay-as-you-go model depending on how many pages you process. So I looked up some possible models for payment, and what I found was in an enterprise of 1,000 people, you're going to pay 5 to 10,000 a month minimum. Okay, it has a better technology behind it. Now, here's the good news about it. It's forms oriented, and it's really good at this. It's really good at taking massive volumes of documents and pulling metadata out of it automatically and sticking it into the metadata in SharePoint. That it's really good at, really, really good at it. I like it. as long as the documents are predictable, right? That's the key. But look at this paragraph I pulled from Microsoft right here, in red right here. It says, hey, look, this is so smart. It can tell a signed contract from a draft. It can even tell what is a purchase order and even what's an invoice. Impressive. But notice what it does not say, right? It has no clue what a case is, nor how to reliably identify the correct case. It's easy to say this is a contract. Which one? Well, the only way it can be relied on is if you can predictably say that at this location in the document, you will always find the name of the contract. That's going to be possible in some documents. But what about email? What about other unstructured documents? What about opinions from people? You can't get all the records together in one case, which is what we need to do, right? Again, it's that last mile. So this is my summary of the realities of the AI. It cannot go the last mile, the case level. It can only get you to 70, 80% accuracy. It has a huge overhead, especially for the trainable classifiers. And at the end of the day, it's dependent on text patterns inside documents. And you know what I think? We can't depend on that. We can't. We cannot predict or depend on document content. We totally cannot. And remember, we're working on a contract. Well, listen, guys, a contract is not a record. A contract is an adventure of many records, 20 emails with 20 opinions and requests and inquiries, 15 versions of the contract, copies of older contracts where we're cutting and pasting useful material out of, spreadsheets with data that we're using inside the contract. So the work of building a contract is a rich mix of documents. You are never going to predict what's in those documents, and they will not always be tied into that case. It's not even feasible. So what is the AI good for? Well, it's really, really good at sensitivity labeling. Now, before I talk about that, I just realized something. I think I have an upcoming slide on it, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to say it here because I'm afraid I'll miss it. Did you know that if you recall from an earlier slide, 4/5 of all modern digital records are email messages? Just think about that for a minute. 4/5. Okay? Let's let that sink in. Now, we're going to use some AI that is going to be dependent on predictable content inside those records to figure out where it's going to go. What do you think you're going to find in email messages? Think about it. Have you ever had a message that says, here it is, or as requested? 2 words, right? So this is just not going to fly. So what is the AI good for? Well, it's really good for sensitivity labeling. Now, this is a really, really important salient point in my view. When it comes to records classification, we need precision. We absolutely need precision. There's zero judgment involved. This record is either about an expense claim or it's about a fleet vehicle maintenance. This email is related to that adventure of writing that contract, or it's about this adventure of this union grievance. Not this other union grievance, that union grievance, right? Zero judgment. But sensitivity is a whole different ball of wax. Sensitivity says, how sensitive is this document? Well, there's a lot of judgment involved in that. That's where you need trainable classifiers because you can't rely on the users for that. It's a judgment call. So your minimum level of success for sensitivity labeling is AI. And then if the user can step up and do better than that, then go with what they suggested. But to me, AI and trainable classifiers are absolutely essential for sensitivity labeling. They are not suitable for records classification. Okay. And the more expensive one, the one that you have to pay as you go, that's great for extracting metadata. If you have a massive shop where you want to take invoice numbers out of a massive number of invoices forms, then it's perfect for that. Okay, a massive effort to justify the cost, right? So if we don't need AI, well, what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is just do it right. What does doing it right look like inside Purview? This is what it looks like, okay? And it's the same approach for all of the 5 record-keeping software products for SharePoint. Um, what you do is you create content rules. What the heck are content rules? They are rules that say, for this content in SharePoint, apply this retention rule. All 5 products do it same way. Well, not the same way, but the same principle, right? You have to have a mechanism to say for these records in SharePoint, apply this particular retention rule. In Purview, they're called auto apply policies. So let's look at one. Here's a couple of rules. If the library is audits, we might have 1,000 records in there for an audit. Audits are big and complicated, right? Voluminous records. So you might have 1,000 documents in that library, but the outcome is the final report. Very valuable record. We want it kept for a long time. But what about the other 999? Well, that's what we call digital debris. They were used to create and support the audit, but they're not as valuable. So we'll get rid of them sooner. So the final report, we want a long retention, where the final report does not say yes, i.e. the other 999, we want a shorter retention. So here we're going to assign audits final report. That's the name of the retention rule. We follow the arrow. It's audit end date plus 10 years and destroy. That's the rule we're going to use for the final report, where audits, library is audits and final report is no, we're going to ditch them in 5 years' time. This rule up here, okay? So if you were to have 800 categories, which is kind of normal for 1,000 users, a retention schedule, a modern, proper retention schedule, then it turns out the statistical average of the number of content rules is 3. So you'll end up with roughly 2,400 or so of these content rules. That's how Purview works. No content rules, no records management. Most records management are kind of sucker punched into thinking that, well, we take our 50 to 100 retention rules, we pump them into Purview, and we're good. No, you're not good. You're not even starting. You have to build your content rules, which can be quite an adventure in Purview. So in your retention schedules, you have to have these content rules as well, right? That's what the retention schedule is. It's going to say for this material of that subject, this is how we're going to treat it for retention. What do these rules look like? Well, here's an example from of a actual content rule. And again, in Purview, they're called auto apply policies. And here you see it says apply label to content that contains specific words or phrases or properties. Very important sentence. What's a label? The label is the retention rule. The right-hand side of that chart I showed you a minute ago. To content in SharePoint that contains, now stop right there, danger between here and here. That's the danger. Specific words or phrases. Specific words or phrases means trainable classifier dependent on content, i.e. specific words or phrases in the document or in the email. So no, go on that. This is what we want right here, properties. Why? Because we can predict it, we can control it, and we can get our levels up to our 85%. So here's what it looks like to create one of these rules in Purview. Refinable string 45 equals audits, and refinable string 00 equals reports. Now, if you want to know what all this means, then just look at one of my YouTube videos and see the explanation. For now, this means library equals audits, and document type equals reports. Okay, that is the condition, excuse me, in the content rule. And the label that will be applied to those documents that meet that condition is this one, safety audits. 10 years, then review, then delete. Okay, so this is my summary. We really cannot rely on content. It's just not predictable. So don't even go there. And remember that email is 4/5 of all the records, and there you have nothing to look for. There's so little content in email. And we can't go the last mile. Well, and there is a better way. Just use content rules. No charge, a lot of work, but it's a lot of work to do trainable classifiers too, and you're not going to get there. This is a lot of work to build these content rules, but you'll get there reliably and safely. So why would we ever use artificial intelligence when we have a better way to do it? So that's it. I'm all done, and I'll stick around for any questions you might have. You can open your mic at any time and verbalize it, or put it in the chat. I'll be here until the questions are all answered. Don't be shy.
Bruce, this is Sheila. I have a question for you.
Sure, Sheila.
So, playing devil's advocate, in the new upgraded version that you pay extra money for the document, what are they called? The DUMs?
Understanding models, yeah.
Yeah, the understanding models. You had talked about that having the functionality to extract metadata
Yes.
from documents that it's analyzing. If it's extracting the metadata and it can come up with like party names for a contract, can that not somehow be used to feed you into the right case so that
Absolutely.
you now
Yeah.
know that this document is Smith and Jones?
Absolutely. So let me tell you how you would go about that, okay? You could use the way the understanding model works is you have to program it like this. You have to say, go down 8 lines, and between lines 8 and 20, look for a pattern that always will contain the name of that company for this contract. Okay. And you'll find it with this, it has to have this character pattern. It has to have the first character of the pattern has to be a letter, then a number, whatever the pattern may be, right? And then go over 20 characters, and that should be enough to capture the name of that contractor. And that will work. But remember, every single record you're putting in has to have that data in that place, in that document. It's never going to happen. You're going to have 10 emails, 100 emails, 1,000 emails. You're going to have versions of drafts of a contract. You're going to have spreadsheets, photographs, everything, all the records related to it, right? So that's why I say that the document understanding model is fantastic for metadata extraction, but there's a condition. The data has to be in the same place, in the same format in every document, every time.
Yeah, but that's highly unlikely because the documents are created by different people, external parties. So then how effective is the metadata extraction that they're doing? Is it actually working?
Oh, well, it does work and it's fantastic, but its purpose is different. It's perfect for high volume data processing. In other words, if you've got a shop where you're receiving identical invoices from your customers at a pace of, I don't know, 1,000 a day, rather than hire 10 people to do data entry, you have this extracted from the PDFs or from the documents that come in. That's its primary purpose, right? But you got to have predictability, and that's my whole point. If you don't have predictability, you have no basis to use AI, right? AI has to be predictable. Now, with ChatGPT and everything else, we're now thinking AI can do magic, which it can. I'm the world's biggest fan of ChatGPT. Trust me, right? But do I think that ChatGPT can be used to look at all the variety of records that come in on a given adventure to create one case? No, 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 not at all, right? There's a difference between classification and knowledge. ChatGPT is a knowledge gatherer, right? It'll do reasoning. It's fantastic. But don't think that you can make classification go away with trainable classifiers. That's never going to happen. Any other questions? Well, if that seemed to be done, that's great. Thank you very much for taking time out of your afternoon to join me. I truly appreciate that. I really do. And check out the YouTube channel. There's going to be lots and lots and lots of useful videos there. And if you want to do a real life project, give me a call. We can help out with a real live project. And training. Don't forget our training, the best on the planet. Thank you again. I very much appreciate it.